So I'm part of a Swiss delegation. We are representing universities, indie projects in the studios, and startups like me. And just as a service announcement, we'll have a pitch hour, 4 o'clock. It starts 4 o'clock. It's invitation only, but I still have some invitations. So if you're interested, please come. There are some crazy, cool, innovative projects being showcased by my colleagues. So it really worth the time. So I wanted to start with Life is Strange. I remember that back in high school, which was a good 25 years ago, I was passionately reading about India and about Hindu philosophy and yoga philosophy, and never thought that 25 years later I will be here in Hyderabad and talking about games and being at a game conference. So life has its really mysterious ways. Back then, of course, we didn't know about citizen science. There was no internet at all. But one thing that we used extensively were video games. And I really hope that I'm not the only one who remember these images. We spent weeks and months with these, and it was already obvious that video games are the most engaging form of entertainment. Now, how does it come to our project? To understand a massively multiplayer online science, I think I have to start to talk a bit about citizen science itself. Citizen science is a concept. It's basically scientific crowdsourcing of data analysis. Data analysis where humans are much better than machine learning and computers. Think about image segmentation, classification, pattern recognition, natural language processing and stuff like that. But even if you haven't heard about the term citizen science, I'm pretty sure that you've seen some of these projects, like the Foldit project. This is the protein folding game, where we citizens help scientists understand the native structure of proteins. This is another example. It's Philo. It's a Canadian project done by a guy at McGill University, and here we are solving DNA sequence alignment problems. This is Galaxy Zoo and the Zooniverse platform. It's the biggest classical citizen science platform out there. They're very active. It's a project originating from Oxford, and they're running parallel at least 50, 60 different citizen science projects ranging from life scientists to social scientists. And as a last example, I brought iWire. This is a project in the US, and here researchers try to understand the three-dimensional structure of visual neurons in the brain. These are all very successful citizen science projects. And the concept here is, as with all citizen sciences, we have these huge databases of images. We distribute it in the crowd. We hand out the same image to 20, 30 different people, and we make some kind of majority voting. And if like 90% of the people, for example, say that there is a zebra on the image or there's a spiral galaxy on the image, then we accept that as a good answer. And it turns out that even though some of the participants may be way off, the wisdom of the crowd works quite well, and we have quite valid results. Now, I was always thrilled by citizen science. I think it's a great concept that we can help scientific advancement. But I also knew the shortcomings, the problems that it faces. And the biggest problem that citizen science faces is the long-term user engagement. So people generally like these projects. They want to have science. They even analyze a couple of images, but then they leave for good. It's simply not engaging enough. So that's where we come to the picture. More than 2 years ago, with a friend of mine, Bernard Revas, we came up with an idea. And we said that instead of making standalone citizen science games and citizen science projects, why don't we take these problems and integrate and inject them into major already existing AAA video games? And do it in a way that we create a seamless gaming experience for the player. So we take these tasks and match them with the visuals, integrate them with the game mechanics, the reward system, and connect the dots with the narrative, with the lore. And our hypothesis was that if we manage to convert a tiny fraction of the time spent with gaming, the billions of hours, then we can create a virtually limitless human computation engine. And this was the concept, but more importantly, we started to work on it. We wanted to make this happen. And for that, we needed partners. This is the project that later became known as Project Discovery, the first implementation. And there were two major areas where we needed partners to make this happen. One was science and the other was games. And first we talked with many scientific research teams. We got very positive answers. And my lucky star led to the Human Protein Atlas, and more specifically to Emma Lundberg and her team. They are creating a database of around 50 million microscope images of tissues and cells. And she's the director of a subcellular atlas. It's an open database, and they're working with images like these. I think that was the first time I saw these kind of images. I think they're just simply beautiful. And in the subcellular atlas, they have 250,000 of these images. I just brought some examples. Really interesting that all of these images are unique, but in the meantime, they share a same aesthetic. So it's really interesting from a game design point of view. And here, what you are supposed to do as a citizen scientist is to localize the green stuff that you see on the image. I'm not a biologist, so I may make errors now, but as far as I understand, they use antibodies to mark a certain type of protein, and that appears as green on the image. And all the rest of the color channels are marking different parts of the cell, and that's only to help you. They're acting as not milestones, but you know, to help you localize where the green stuff is appearing on the images. And that's important because if they know the location of a protein, they can draw conclusions on the biological function. So, for example, in this image, the protein is localized to the actin filaments, and so they know that this protein probably plays a role in cell shape or movement. And on this data set, researchers defined some goals for this scientific goals for the project. One goal was to refine the database itself. Originally, when they were classifying the images, they used only 20 different locations. For example, the nucleus was just one location, and they wanted players to refine these. And they also were very interested how experts perform compared to players and compared to artificial intelligence and machine learning solutions. So now we had a very good, actually we selected this project together with EVE Online as the first implementation, but we had a very solid scientific project. And on the other hand, we wanted to find a good game. And for that, it was right at the beginning, the first day that we had this idea, I knew that EVE Online is a perfect partner. It's the biggest science fiction, massively multiplayer online game. They have about 500,000 subscribers, which is not too much, I guess, to Indian standards, but they're still the biggest science fiction, massively multiplayer online game. And because of that, they're already a good fit, because science fiction is a good fit thematically to many research projects or research topics. Also, the game is quite complicated, so there is a steep learning curve. And that means that we can present players a difficult challenge. They won't be discouraged by that. And other things like EVE Online being photorealistic, so it's easy to integrate a microscopic photo in the game without destroying the artistic side of the game. So I tried to get in touch with these guys, and finally I managed to talk to Andy Nordgren. At that time she was the executive producer, and she said that it sounds intriguing, let's talk. And so we started to work on this. EVE Online is a very special game. It's a sandbox game, so CCP, the company behind it, created a complex set of rules for the EVE universe. But it's the gamers who are creating the content. And since I know that not everybody knows about EVE Online, I wanted to play one of their trailers, and it's special because it was made in 2014, but I think it's the only trailer in the AAA market where they didn't use cinematics, but instead used player-created content and actual recreation of player battles. I think it's a genius idea. So. So this is its special trailer of Eve Online. I think I mean they did a really great job, and there's a little bit of ad for them. They're actually going free to play next week, which is the biggest change in the history of Eve. So we're anticipating an influx of millions of new players, which is very, very good news for Project Discovery as well. So we started to work on it, and Andy Nordgren, the executive producer, was very supportive and fell in love with the project. But we had to find out how this is going to be working in Eve, because she had to justify this project in-house, but also to the gamer community, because this is definitely not a core game playing part. So. And it needs resources. So she had to justify to the players why they are taking part in this. And part of that was that we set up a structure where there were four parties working on this project. One is CCP. Of course, they had the developers and the experience to make this happen inside the game. There was a human protein atlas. They had a research problem. There was the Reykjavik University, where students we invited students to work on this project as a part of their diploma work. And there was us who were and we were creating the link between science and games, also in a technological sense. And then the result was this Project Discovery, and the story in the game is that in-game NPC corporation Sisters of Eve is launching a crowdsourced attempt to understand the tissue samples that they collected from drifter data. And there was Professor Landberg as a character created. And I just want to show you another video. This was the launch or introduction video of the feature in the game. And I think it shows how great a job they did of integrating this project into the lore and into the visuals.
Withdrawal of drifter forces from Amar space has brought a sullen end to their attacks. The Imperial Navy has been embroiled in an endless string of staggering losses, including the assassination of Empress Jamal I, making this a much-needed reprieve. The sudden drifter pullback to the 5 known hive systems are believed to be connected to the Capsuleer reports that gate restrictions in those systems have been removed, clearing the path for Capsuleers committed to pushing back the drifter menace. The conflict has certainly taken its toll on the Amar military, and talks of the withdrawal being a reaction to Sisters of Eve, and Capsuleer actions only adds insult to injury for the Amar. Meanwhile, Sisters of Eve has launched a crowdsourced analysis of collected drifter data, entitled Project Discovery, and rallied under the banner of Citizen Science Begins With You. They hope to unlock the new drifter tech so that they may be made public and shared with all. This is Lena Amber, reporting for The Scope.
So for us, this was, when we saw this video, it was really amazing because, this was the kind of integration that we were dreaming of originally. It was just fascinating. And I wanted to show you the interface. It's a mini game inside EVE Online. And you have an interface where you get a microscopic image on the left side that you are asked to analyze. And on the right side, there are 27 different locations. To help this process, you can switch on and off different color channels. And also, there is a description for the location and some sample images that you can work with. Once you're ready, you submit your classification to the servers. That actually, at that point, we talk to the EVE servers and where we get this data. And we provide information on how good the player is doing. We're using two types of images. One type is the gold standard, where we know what is the good answer. That's how we benchmark the player performance. Here you see actually a gold standard image, so we can tell you whether you're doing good or not. And if you get an image where we don't know what is the good answer, we still wanted to show you something, because otherwise it's, again, super boring. So we show how the community consensus is forming. It may be misleading, it may be wrong, but at least you have something to compete with or something to be angry at. And then after this, you get this reward screen where you get in-game currency. You get analysis credits, which is another special in-game currency for the project that you can use to buy cool stuff like Sisters of Eve combat suits. And of course, you are leveling up. What's interesting to see here, that is Professor Lundberg, that's the NPC that is guiding you through the project. She was sculpted after Emma Lundberg, who is the director of the Subcellular Atlas. So it was It was a cool idea from the game designers at CCP. To go a bit more into detail, since this is a developer conference, I'll show you the high-level architectural overview. What's interesting, and I think it was a very good decision in the beginning, that we created a transition layer between the scientific research problem and the game. And it's under our control. We are doing the heavy lifting for citizen science, and it's independent. So it's very easily adaptable for different scientific research purposes, and also to work together with other games. And also, to go even a bit more into detail, I wanted to show you a couple of lines of code. This is in JavaScript, but of course you can transcribe it easily to any other language, just to show you how easy it is to integrate into another game, because of course I want to convince you to do this project as well. So there are two main calls to our API. One is to request a task, where you have to give us really minimal information, some obfuscated player code that we can track the player performance, a project ID if you're running multiple projects for the game, and of course the game ID. We give back all the necessary information for you to visualize the task. In this case, for example, a URL to the image. And then once the player is ready, you are submitting the result of the classification to our servers, and we give you back all the information that is necessary to visualize the results. So that's basically the two functions that you're talking to with our API. Now, the other interesting thing is, that was the technological part of the project. Another interesting thing is, for you game developers, is why does it make sense to work on this project? And this slide is actually from the Nordic Game Conference, where we were presenting together with Andy Nordgren, where she actually defined 4 pillars that were the foundation of the project for CCP. And I think it's super important that the first pillar was doing good in the world and helping science. I think this is when we are doing citizen science work as individuals, this is the intrinsic motivation that drives us. But I think it's very important that if you're a game developer company, you also have this intrinsic motivation. Of course, this project is potentially bringing very good press to the game, and it's good not just for the game, but the whole gaming industry. And also it raised awareness about EVE Online, so that was also a very beneficial effect of the project for them. We provided great content, and as one of the senior creative producers told it in an article about a project, that content is gold in games. Content has the value of gold. And with a project like this, you get to work, you have the possibility to work with, for example, 250,000 images, each of them unique. It's an amazing material to work with. And that's the basis to create a really cool player experience. And last but not least, it was a very good chance for them to work together with the university, and the project was so sexy that they actually had the possibility to select the best students of the class to work with. So these were the four pillars, and I think it's very important for anybody who is considering to work with this project is to have more than just one reason why you're working with this. I think if you, for example, would do this just for the good press, it's simply not enough, because if it doesn't happen, then the project crashes, and nobody wants that. So a little bit about the results. First of all, I want to talk about how the player community reacted, because I think that's one of the most important for you as game developers, is to have a happy player community. And players embraced the project in amazing ways. They were very active. There was a subreddit group about the project. They were very supportive. Amazing amount of content was created, tutorials, wiki pages. They were talking about project discovery in forums. There's a couple of quotations of what they were talking about. Really nice, interesting aspects of the project, like the first one is like when he says that it's like potato chips when assessing the samples. I'll just do one more, which is more of a praise to CCP, how good job they did with the game design itself. Also, other quotes about the internal or intrinsic motivation that players have to be part. There was even a poetry contest about project discovery, and this is my favorite, which says tubuli are red, nucleus is blue, but it's only the green that matters to you, which was a response to the first day when players were not sure what is the thing that they're matching to. So beautiful stuff. Then scientific results, very important, of course. And I intentionally don't start with the data that we collected, because in citizen science projects, scientific outreach is as important as the data. So for scientists, it's paramount that we understand what they're doing and why is it important. First of all, they're passionate about their work, so they're happy to tell us about this. And in the long strategical aspect of science, it's very important that outsiders understand this project, because if we get too far, then social support, and then political support, and then funding will disappear from this project. So it's very important. And I think in that sense, project discovery was one of the biggest scientific outreach in proteomics. A lot of players have had a chance to have first-hand experience of what it means to work with these images, what are the locations in the cell. It was around, let's say, 150,000 players that played with project discovery so far. I'm saying rough numbers because we see only accounts, and one player can have multiple accounts. And of course, the team, the scientific research team, was very involved in the process. The most beautiful story that I have is that Emma participated in many events, but once she came to EVE Vegas, which is a player convention, to talk to player, and she canceled the conference in proteomics where she was supposed to talk about to her scientific colleagues. And I think it shows how important this whole project for them as a tool of scientific outreach. One of the members of the team made even a streaming, actually it was 2 streaming lectures about proteomics in-game in a corporation called EVE University. And she used almost the same materials that they use at the Stockholm University to teach students proteomics. So it was a really nice crossover between science, education, and games. Now back to the data. I checked it a couple of days ago, and we are over 70 million classifications, which is just unprecedented in citizen science. It means 17 million images presented to a player and getting results on that. Of course, the first day was a huge peak. In just the first day, we had almost 500,000 classifications, but it was like, I think 4 or 5 hours downtime because the activity was so high that it killed our service. And we had almost 50 million images, or 15,000 images, reaching consensus, meaning the task was closed. And from the reward side, we had 55 Sisters of Eve combat suits achieved by players, which is, you have to know that this is the ultimate reward in project discovery, and it takes like, I think, more than 10 hours of continuous analysis of images to get it. And the first one was awarded 17 hours and 7 minutes after the launch of the project, and the second one was awarded 6 minutes later, which is like I don't know, having a coffee or something like that. So it was amazing. Time spent, 400 million seconds, which doesn't tell too much, but if you add it up, it's almost 13 years, 24/7. But more importantly, if using Swedish, because the research group is Swedish, so Swedish work days, it's 54 work years, which is just amazing. This is what players added to researchers so far, and they keep doing it. If we're talking about the results, I think when it comes to scientific results, it's not just about the numbers, but what we actually achieved with Project Discovery. And although they're still analyzing the data, there's one thing I can talk about. It was already presented by Emma at eFemfest, that there is this special location called Rods and Rings, if you look at the image for obvious reasons. And it's a fairly uncharacterized structure, so they're very interested in it. And players have identified 109 new protein candidates that play a part in this specific protein structure. Apart from that, there will be a new edition of the Protein Atlas released in December 4, which will already consist the player contribution, and there will be, end of this year, a poster in Science also mentioning the effort that players put into the Human Protein Atlas. So I find this really beautiful. Now the other reason, or the other, let's say, pillar of the project was the good press, and we were really amazed by how many articles we had in mainstream media, which is, I think it's really important that it's not only just gaming magazines, but we had like articles in like the Independent. There was an article in the New Yorker and Wall Street Journal. We were on the front page of the Wall Street Journal online edition. I think it's really important that people outside the gaming world also were talking about this as a very positive thing. And it's really not just about EVE Online, it's not just about us, but it's good for the whole gaming industry. And also, we were mentioned in high-profile scientific journals like the Nature Biotech or Nature Methods. So, Project Discovery, I think it was a project of many firsts. Sometimes I say that it's now part of gaming history, which may be an overstatement, but I believe we accomplished quite a lot. I think it's the first time that the serious game got integrated into a AAA game. It is the first time that an acting scientist is in a game as an NPC. This is the first time that high-profile journals, scientific journals like Nature Methods actually published screenshots of a video game. That never happened before, as far as we know. And for example, we created the first. We created the. Oh, it's that's nice. We created the first citizen science PvP tournament, live tournament at the eFemfest, which was also interesting. So the future. I think it's working. So the future, I wanted to talk about a couple of the projects we're working with. MMOS Edu. Of course, first of all, of course, we're continuing our project with EVE Online. We're already investigating new project that we want to integrate in the game. Another project that I can talk about is with Gearbox. They're the big US development company, where Randy Pitchford, the founder and president of Gearbox, is a big fan and supporter of our project, and we already announced officially that we want to integrate this into their titles. But we realized that what we are doing from a higher perspective is we're trying to approach already existing and already functioning online communities and try to smuggle a bit of science into what they're doing. And in that effort, we started to work together with the University of Geneva. Namely, we want to put real scientific data in one of their MOOCs. These are these big open online courses that universities give all over the world. And we thought that, you know, there are tens of thousands of people in these courses, absolutely motivated, wants to give their best. Why don't we give them real data to work with in the assignment section? So that's what we're working on. It will be out relatively soon. Also important is that recently, it's quite fresh news, recently we got funding from Horizon 2020. We're very proud of that because we won this grant as consortium leaders with a very prestigious consortium. Of course with the EVE Online and Human Protein Atlas, but also with University of Geneva, University of Amsterdam, University of Ghent, the Natural History Museum of Paris, and Hungarian IT solution provider Virgo Systems. And why is it important for us? Because it gives us a lot of possibility to enhance our service. For example, with things like a developer portal. So now you have to contact us personally if we want to start to work together. With the developer portal, with the sample data, you will be able to kind of play with the system without, before contacting us. So MMOS in India, Swissnex told me that I have to touch this topic, and of course it makes sense why I'm here. And one thing is, of course, we want to have partners in research, but more importantly here is that we are looking for partners in the gaming industry. And we are here for a couple of days now. We've seen very interesting projects. We've met very interesting people. And there are basically two fields where I see possible areas of cooperation. One is if you're working on your own title and you believe that this is something important and you want to integrate this feature into your game. And the other one is, as we've learned, there are a lot of companies who are working together with big international game development companies. If you see that there would be some interest and connect us, that's also a huge help for us. So to finish up, I brought some pictures of how I would imagine this feature to be integrated in different type of games. And this is, of course, not projects that we're working on. This is absolutely me who downloaded some images, just to give you an impression. This first one is, I took the image from Zoo Tycoon, and the photo that you see is coming from a project called Serengeti Safari, as far as I remember. These are automated cameras out in the Serengeti National Park. And you can imagine that these images can easily be analyzed by children. And it's educative, children can show you what they've learned in the game. I think it's really interesting. This image in the middle is coming from the Human Protein Atlas. Again, these are cancerous tissue images. And putting it into a game like Fallout 4 is a very interesting thematical match. I created this one to show you how seamless the integration can be. These are actually the same images that we use in EVE Online, but I'm pretty sure that if we wouldn't have talked about this before, maybe you even wouldn't realize that this is not something that's an integral part of the game. The game itself is Civilization Beyond Earth. And last but not least, this is No Man's Sky. I did this image a long time ago. And what you see in the middle, again, this is about visual matching, is a blood smear sample that they use for malaria diagnosis. And just to show you that it's in the game and it's not destroying the gaming experience at all. Okay, thank you very much.